Hello, everyone, and welcome to Discover Rising Tides, How the Outside Makes the Inside Better. I am Jeanne Gallagher, and I'm so glad that you're here. And if you're just listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, jump on over to YouTube if you'd like to see our faces. We'll be there waiting for you. And I'm excited to introduce our guest today, Michelle Boyde. Hi, Michelle. Thanks for coming.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to have a chat with you today.
Oh, it's going to be wonderful. I'm really looking forward to it as well. So, before we get started, give us a little bit about your background and then we'll dive right in.
Absolutely. So, my background is I am English by birth, but I'm also an Australian these days. I lived in Australia for 12 years, but at the moment, I am actually moving around the globe with my business looking for a new home. So, I'm in a nomadic phase of my life, which is really interesting because, of course, you get to explore different environments and how your identity fits in those environments. But my background is I used to be a brand and culture strategist for about 15 years. So I used to work directly with C-suite around if this is the business strategy, what's the culture we need to land that into to deliver it successfully. And 7 years ago, I decided I did not want to do that anymore. And so I kind of saved up what I call the Freedom Fund. And I walked away from that career with no idea of what I wanted to do next at all. I thought, let's just explore and see what starts to emerge. And then I did a bunch of retraining. And then over the last 7 years, I've been running my own business as an identity alchemist. So I work with people's identity so that I can shift them into an elevated identity, and then they can achieve all of the results that actually fit with that elevated identity. So it's a very quick rundown of my background.
It is. And I love how you pre-planned this unplanned portion of your life.
Yes, I think it's, I love to match both sides, the practical, logical side, along with the space for the intuitive, the imagination, the seeing what emerges. And I think you actually need to have both sides to be successful. I think if you sit too tightly in one, you miss the wonderful attributes of the other. So yeah, there is, I think depending on how you observe what I do, sometimes some people think I'm just sort of drop of the hat, I do this or that. It's never without, there's some logic and rationality, but there's always a lot of space for magic to come through, which I think is important.
And the Freedom Fund, how fun is that's such a great name for what you did in that preparation for jumping out into the world to physically find your space. You have your space professionally, but finding where you need to be yourself logistically, but having that pre-planning portion, like you said, it's very important because it allows for you to be able to relax into where you're at and not have to financially worry about what is this going to look like and force things that might not naturally be supposed to be happening.
Completely. And my biggest kind of the thing that I didn't want to do was that I walk away from a successful career and then I almost have to step back into something or something that's not actually correct for my next phase simply because I don't have enough money. So that's why it was a preparation. I gave myself a year. I was like, I'd saved up enough to do 12 months of just my life as it was in Sydney at the time to be able to explore and see what happened and emerged, which I do understand not everyone has that opportunity, but it's it provided a really fertile ground for me to explore, which was
that's fantastic. And so what is an identity alchemist?
So great question. I do get this quite a lot. So what I do is I work with visionaries and emerging icons, people who are essentially here to do really exciting stuff. And I support them and guide them into their elevated identity, because what's happening is the next, version of their business, their career, their leadership that they envisage is not going to be created from where they are. So there is a whole new identity within themselves, subconsciously, somatically, energetically, all of that side of things. It's much more than just mindsets, behaviors. That is actually going to be what creates that and births that vision. So there is this space when you're moving between identities, which I call the liminal space. And we can certainly talk about how you're in that liminal space. And it's this, you know, it's an in-between. The liminal is in between. So we have, you know, physical liminal spaces, corridors,
Mm-hmm.
airports, you know, we have biological ones. Perimenopause is a great example of that, or, you know, your teenage years. And then we have, from an identity perspective, we have the liminal space. And it's when you are not who you were. You've definitely been shedding a lot of that person,
Mm.
not yet who you're becoming. So it's this weird in between, which on one hand can feel deeply overwhelming and uncomfortable at times, but on the other hand is full of possibility and potential. And how you navigate this liminal space between identities will dictate, you know, what you're actually able to create and experience on the other side. And so my
And
work
so,
is,
oh, sorry. People are, when they're in between, it could be in between careers, but it also can be that, you know, quite often you hear the midlife crisis, but that crisis, it could also be that in between space of transition.
Absolutely. And so, how the liminal shows up in those really practical outside things are, as
Mhm.
you say, career change can be one. If you're running a business, it's often you feel that your business is due an evolution. You're kind of no longer
Mm.
excited by what you're creating. You don't really want to do it. You have this urge to kill off products and services and get rid of clients. And you know there's something else coming. The liminal will often reflect in your relationships, everything
Mhm.
from your romantic ones through to your friendships, your family relationships. It'll show up lots of ways in the outside world. You might want to change where you live, but fundamentally there is this identity shift that is happening in you. You are becoming a new version of yourself.
And not having somebody to guide through, especially a third party looking at from the outside in to guide through, the results could be very different than having a guide such as yourself to lead that discovery process.
Absolutely, because what is always going to be happening is that the identity that you're leaving and shedding is going to kick up and want to hold you back.
Mhm.
And so the speed and efficiency that you can actually close that part of your identity down and then fully master the new identity is going to dictate how fast you move through that liminal space and how you start to experience all the stuff that sits on the other side of it. So the liminal, as I said, can be deeply uncomfortable. And there's almost five key things that people will observe. So if you're listening to this, you can almost go through and you'll know if you're in it, and you'll be sat there going, oh, I'm in this space, I'm in this space. So one of the things you experience is you often thought you knew what you wanted, and then you're not sure anymore. So this might be, you might have had a business vision, you might have had a career
Mhm.
vision, a life vision, you might have been really clear about this was all the stuff that was going to make me happy. And then you reach this point where you suddenly go, I don't know if this is mine anymore.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if I want to keep channeling all my energy and my effort, my focus behind this. And that's because that vision, that desire belonged to the old identity.
Mm.
And so it's often a bit confusing because you kind of know you don't think you want that thing anymore, but you don't actually know what the next thing is. And what I want to reassure you is you won't know fully until you master that new identity, because it belongs to her, it belongs to him. But one of those things you'll really notice is that, yeah, I don't think I want the things I thought I wanted. The career directory, the business I was building, the relationship sometimes I'm in, all of that starts to be up for question. The second thing that you will experience is you will be much more tired than you feel you should be. So you're not really doing anymore. You're not working harder. You've not gotten more clients. You're not taking on more stuff, but you're just suddenly much, much more tired. And you have this urge to sleep more and to look after yourself. And that's because when you're going through a big identity shift like this and you're moving into an elevated identity, subconsciously, somatically, there's so much stuff changing and rewiring under the surface. So much of your energy is actually going into that you're not aware of, that you are
Mhm.
just a lot more tired. And also what happens is that as you have those moments when you really experience the new identity, is that it takes a bit more energy to hold it because you're not
Mm.
used to it. So like the example I'd give you is if you go to the gym and you suddenly start lifting heavier weights, or if you're a runner and you start extending the distance you run, you can do it, but then the recovery time is a bit more while you're kind of getting
Mhm.
up to speed. Exactly the same thing happening in the liminal space.
And that tiredness can be an emotional tiredness that affects the body as well.
Absolutely. And that's the third one. It's like you're way ahead of
Oh,
me. Is this it's no, so totally, you're with me. So
and you didn't prep me before.
I didn't no idea what was coming. You're in good tune with me. So yeah, the third one is there can be a real emotional roller coaster.
Mhm.
And so someone who doesn't even experience themselves particularly as an emotional person, when they're in the liminal experience, will feel like their emotions are much bigger. And so
Mm.
you can feel 1 minute like, oh, I know everything's changing and I'm so excited and, this is great, full of possibility. And then the next minute, it's the other end of the scale and you sort of want to curl up in the corner and you're thinking, what on earth is going on? And I can't hold this and I can't do this. And so you have this really big emotional experience as you move through a much broader range of those emotions. So that's the third thing. The fourth thing that you're going to experience is that your inner critic becomes really, really loud.
Mm.
So it's also can be for people who've done a lot of personal development, they've maybe done a lot of therapy, they feel like they've done a lot of work on themselves, is you can feel like everything I've done, it almost feels like I didn't do it properly. And the
Mhm.
analogy that I love to give is, if you're watching like a scary movie and you have that moment where the monster kind of puts his arm up over the cliff and tries to pull you back one last time, that's what's happening. It's like all of the old stuff that was associated with the identity that you're leaving is coming up to pull you back one more time.
Mm.
So you may find that your imposter syndrome is going through the roof and you're criticizing yourself. Am I good enough? Can I do this? Who am I to do this? Etc. Etc. So you will feel all that stuff come up really strongly, which again can be deeply unnerving. And that's one of the things that often shifts that emotional experience for you as well.
It seems to me that this one people might identify with more because it's all wrapped in that self-doubt piece where you felt very confident in what you were doing previously, and maybe what you're doing hasn't changed immensely. However, there's this self-doubt piece that's coming in. Am I really on the right track? Is this really where I want to go? And that piece comes in, and we might identify that self-doubt or that inner critic, as you say, as coming from a different cause, but it could be a piece of this transitional time that you're in.
It is completely. And
Mhm.
because what's happening is that for you to fully master this new identity, this elevated identity, you have to have mastered everything of the one before. So you can't carry over any of the stuff that you kind of thought that you'd sorted out, but you haven't actually truly mastered and embodied. And, this is one of the areas where environment is a really good indicator. And so if anyone's listening to this and you're thinking, okay, this is great, but like, how do I identify this stuff? How do I help myself out? Here's a tip that you can do where you don't need somebody like me, for example, is that there is a difference between our thoughts and our beliefs. So our thoughts are situational, so they're affected by the situation and the environment, but a belief remains the same irrespective of where we put you. So, for example, if you can say, I am successful when you sit in a certain room of people,
Mhm.
and yet if we move you into another room of people with people that are perhaps, in bigger roles, work for bigger companies, earn more money, their businesses are doing different stuff, and yet in that room, you can't say I'm successful. That's not something that you experience. Then what you've
Mm.
identified as something you think. You think you're successful in some rooms, but you don't really believe it. So this is
Oh,
something.
interesting. That's a great analogy.
So
Mhm.
that's something that then is there to be mastered. So this whole thing with this inner critic is that all this stuff is popping up where you're like, oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, who am I to do this? Oh, I'm not successful enough. I'm not smart enough, or whatever it is. It's you being shown this is stuff that you probably think you've actually worked on and mastered, but you haven't completely mastered it. And so that's what's actually happening in that space, because we can't be just operating from our minds all the time. We
Mhm.
actually have to have it fully mastered through the whole of our system. So
Interesting.
they're the first
Uh,
four.
mhm.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I was going to say, and number five.
And number five is money.
Ah,
What you will discover is that any residual money stuff will pop up because again, this elevated identity is going to be having a different relationship to money. So it might be making more money, might be making money in different ways, you know, especially if you're transforming your business into something completely different. You might be being paid for something completely different, you know, and this is something that's going to be happening also across the board, because as obviously we start to use AI for different stuff, the roles that we play is going to look different, whether you work for someone or you run your own business. And so what can I as an individual actually be paid for is a whole other thing to get your head around, right? So what you will also find in these liminal spaces is that the money stuff comes up, and that can look like, can I be paid for this? Am I worth it? Can I ask for that much? Do I have enough? All of that sort of thing. And you'll see this very often with people who leave successful careers and then they move into running businesses. So they're used to earning really good money. So it's not like they haven't earned this money before, but once you move them into a different environment, then they start to question. They really start to experience that ceiling of what money feels like for them. So they are 5 ways that you will know you're in the liminal. So the first one is you'll be like, is this what I really want? You're questioning your vision. Second one, you're like super tired. Third one, your emotional roller coaster appears and is bigger than ever. Third one is inner critic is shouting at you. It's like it's screaming on your shoulder. And then the fifth one is you'll notice discomfort around your relationship to money. So they're the ways you know you're in the liminal.
Interesting. And that relationship with money shows up in so many different ways that it can be surprising, but it really manifests itself in the self-worth piece.
Oh, it absolutely does. Yeah, it does. And you're developing a new sense of your worth when you move into an elevated identity. And so it's natural that in a world where money is linked into everything, that is an experience that you're going to have.
So let's break down elevated identity, because honestly, I'd never heard of the term before we talked. And you're talking about taking somebody from through this liminal space and creating or helping discover their elevated identity. But really, what is it?
Yeah, so there's some misconceptions around how identity works. So a lot of people believe that it's almost this fairly linear process. So I'm an identity now, and then I can move into another identity, and then I can move into another one ahead of that. And they kind of run in that way. And that's not actually how identity architecture works. And I'm not talking mindsets and behaviors when I talk about this. I'm actually talking about the options of different identities that you have to move into. So if I kind of give you a visual, I want you to imagine that we've got these different levels, these different almost planes. And you're sitting on one of those right now in the identity you're in. And you have 2 options, broadly speaking. You can move across into other identities that are on the plane that you're on, or you can move into an elevated identity, which is on another level of consciousness. And so this is the work that I do. And so what you'll find when you stay on that same plane is that you can shift lots of external things. So you might change your job. You might move to a different location. You might divorce one person, marry another person. And so it looks like, oh, you've shifted your identity. You might change your hair, your clothes, etc. And that's all great. And all that stuff can show up in an elevated identity as well. But when you stay on that same level, it's a bit like if you were taking, horizontal step, perhaps in an organization. But what you'll find is all the stuff that was challenging, all the patterns that showed up in the other identity, they continue to show up here. So if you were having problems with money, you'll find similar stuff shows up. If you found that you were always attracting a certain type of relationship, that turns up. If you find that you always had the same problems with your colleagues or your clients, it turns up. So you actually don't really evolve any of the real identity stuff because it all plays out the same. You just change some of the stuff that sits on the surface. So to other people, it might look different, but you're actually having a very similar experience. Whereas elevated identity, you'll find your experience of all those things shifts. And what's really interesting is that it's not this linear process where it's like, okay, I move from this identity, this one's lined up. There's so much choice involved. So you actually get to choose where you want to go in all of these different spaces. And the key thing here is taking action to move into those identities, because when you take action towards those identities, all that stuff we've spoken about that you experience the liminal comes up really loud for you to then be able to master it and move into those spaces. So
So do your habits come into play here too? Because if you're in, I like the visual of the different planes or levels, but and if you're making those career change, you went from corporate to self-employed, even though maybe you're doing what you're doing in your own business is a similar skill set that you've spent years developing. So you are a master of that skill, but now you're taking the safety net out, meaning that there's no corporation behind you. It is you. You are the business and you are it, if you will, right? And so, but your um, habits are continuing to the next project. Is that part of it?
So habits are a part of it. It's quite a straightforward thing that you can adjust. So you can ask yourself, in this identity, would I be doing X, Y, Z? Or what
Hmm.
would this version of me be doing? And then, follow through with those things, because of course everything has to come through into the world we live in. So yes, habits are a practical way. The other part is your perception. The way
Okay.
that you see the world is going to be very different from a new identity. And so, taking your example, for example, as an employee, how you see the world as an employee versus how you see the world as an entrepreneur, vastly
Hmm.
different if you're going to be successful. Even though, like you say, the expertise, the specialism is actually the same. And you
Hmm.
might even package it up into a very similar product or service. But how you have to see the world, how you have to interact with possibility and potential has to
Hmm.
be very, very different. And this is one of these things that, again, people can feel that they're making the change and they're not. So what will often happen when you're in this liminal space between these identities is that, smart, proactive, high performing people are like, right, I'm going to sort this out, I'm going to take this into my own hands. And so they start sourcing a lot of information outside of themselves. So they listen to
Hmm.
podcasts, they read more books, they take courses, they get coaches, they do all this sort of stuff, right? However, you're not what you're actually doing in those instances is that you're not often truly changing your perception. You're just picking up somebody else's. So the story
Mm.
that I love to give is, if you imagine you are in a house, right? And in
Hmm.
one identity, you are standing at one window and you are always looking out that window. That's your view of the world. Sometimes it adjusts, sometimes it rains, it's sunny. You might put on a pair of sunglasses, but you're basically always seeing the same thing. Now, when you listen to all this other stuff from other people, it's often you think you're being inspired, you're actually just being influenced. And so it doesn't truly change what you see out of that window. But when you shift identities, what happens is you walk from that window to a completely different window in the house, and you look out and you see a completely different world outside. You get a different perception.
Hmm.
And this is the thing as well, is if you are, and this is a bit of reassurance, if you're sitting in a place now where you're going, I know stuff's changing, I know I'm moving somewhere else, I know there's something else I want to create, but I don't know how. I can't even tell you exactly what. My logical, rational mind can't get its hands around what to do next. That's because you're not in that identity. Once you hit that identity, you'll know the strategy, you'll know the approach, you'll know exactly what to do, because it's all part of that perception that belongs to that elevated identity.
Hmm. One word that came up while you were talking came up to me is superficial. So the books that you're reading and maybe the coaching and the podcasting that you're listening to, that's very much of a superficial change, the change on the outside. And what you're referring to is the change on the inside that really affects the outside. So if you're changing the outside might end up looking totally different than what you think it would, because you're starting from the inside working out versus starting from the outside working in, which is what we normally do. Would that?
Yeah, that's a lovely way of putting it. Because when I talk about mastery, lots of
Mhm.
people, when they think of mastery, they go to capability, experience,
Mhm.
strength, strategy, external stuff, like you say. But that's not the mastery. The mastery is basically everything from the neck down.
Okay. It's an interesting concept, and it's not something that a lot of people, because we are in this outside shell of a change world.
Yeah, we really are. And if you think about what we reward,
Hmm.
we reward strategic, abstract thinking. You know, we promote people for being very logical, rational, generally in their heads. I know there is, you know, obviously there's creative industries where we reward people for creative thinking as well. But generally speaking, it's intellect that is rewarded in our
Hmm.
society, and logic and rationality. And that's brilliant, but it's like one part of the coin. It's almost back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of the conversation. You've got to have that other part as well. And this is the thing, your intuition will give you so much of this guidance, but you've got to get out of your head. So if you keep feeding the head, and if you keep feeding the external aspects only, you're not really fertilizing, you're not fertilizing all of what you have.
And the intention doesn't have an opportunity to sprout and take over, right?
Absolutely. It's
Hmm.
it's amazing how often where you're headed, you can't imagine it from where you are.
Mm.
And that's why it doesn't seem possible. You know, I've got some really interesting, very
Wait. Can you say that over again? That was really good.
yeah, what did I say? I said that
You
often
can't see where you are. You wait, you're not, you don't, yes.
you can't see where you're going from where you are, and you
Hmm.
can't logic your way to it. And if you're listening to me and you're thinking, yeah, but also think about, you know, some of the most successful and extraordinary people, whether we're talking about, you know, Steve Jobs or we're talking about Einstein, their magic actually came through intuition.
Hmm.
A lot of logic and intellect was used to bring it to the world, but actually the direction, it comes from within, it comes from somewhere else. And I think that's really, really important. So if you're not connected into yourself and you're looking to have a direction change in life, then you're missing the best GPS that you have available to you.
And really, that's what you're doing is you're helping create that energetic intuition piece,
It's absolutely part of it, yeah.
part
So
of it, but it's not all of it. It's because it really is robust and complete in this process and this change or transformation.
yeah, it is fundamental. And you know, the leadership that we're going into, the era of leadership, is going to have more and more of that intuition involved in it, that ability to see beyond where we are. Because uh, if we think about when you're using the present moment or you're using history for information, it's always something that hasn't come before. And anything
Mhm.
that you're taking in through your senses, your five senses, is based in the present moment. It's always present information. But you have access to other information that doesn't come through those senses. And that's the additional piece that brings in a lot of that magic in the direction of where you're going. And the thing with it is, it requires a lot of trust.
Mm.
You know, it requires a lot of trust. It sometimes requires us to leap without having the whole picture in place,
Mm.
which is deeply uncomfortable, especially if you're someone that likes to know everything, can have everything organized.
So when you're working with clients, what does this look like? What is
What
the
is it?
process? Is that easy to, I don't know, probably not even easy to answer, but take a step.
Yeah, so I mean, I can totally simplify it. So one of the things that my clients, you know, say is that we don't do an awful lot of talking. We get down below the neck.
Mhm.
So what we're doing is we're starting to master all of that stuff that needs to be mastered to collapse that liminal space. And so what I do is I work with your subconscious, I work with your body, I work in your energy field to find essentially those distortions that at the moment are keeping you in the liminal and not moving you into that elevated identity. Because what you will find is that your body and your subconscious, and not all of your body is subconscious, but all of your subconscious is in your body,
Mhm.
it is going to be having a reaction to the changes that you're creating. So, what I often find, and this isn't why clients come to me, but it's there happening as well, is that they'll have a rash that's kind of appeared. They don't know why they've got a rash, or they've developed a bit of backache that they didn't have, or a bit of shoulder pain, or there'll be something happening in their body. And this is their body going, hey, whoa, 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 where are we going? And so these things all disappear when we do this work, but they're also full of wisdom of what needs to be resolved for you to totally let that old identity go and fully master the one that you want to move into. So when you hear, other people talk about, oh, these beliefs, etc., all those beliefs manifest somewhere in the body. They're somewhere in your being. So we can go in and find those and shift them and move them and alchemize them, hence the name Identity Alchemist, so that then space is actually created for that new elevated identity to sink in.
And for your personal process of the change that you put yourself through, you noticed a lot of these things along the way, and that's really what has motivated you to share and help others.
So I was doing it. I mean, it's one of these things. I feel like very often the work you end up doing ends up being, work that's actually been pretty profound for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started doing this 7 years ago, it wasn't purely identity stuff. I was doing, there was lots of stuff that I was able to do with the modalities and the training that I did. Lots of hypnotic work. I got rid of tinnitus, insomniacs.
Oh, well, we need to talk about that.
all sorts of stuff. But then, of course, I was going personally through a massive identity shift. I left a very successful consulting career, which I threw to the wind, and then, and became an entrepreneur. And anyone who starts a business knows that there's a lot of layers in that experience. But then also just continuing to evolve into the woman that I'm still becoming. But to your point, there's been some notable things that's been happening. So I've been in Australia for 12 years. I love Australia. I became an Australian citizen. Beautiful country, has my heart. But I packed up my life in March. I got rid of everything I owned. I'm now living out of a 65-litre bag. And as I said, I'm currently in Mexico City because I'm very lucky that my business is international and can go with me. But my body really started to communicate that the next stage for my elevated identity was not going to be in Australia. So one story in particular and it really came up, this was in March last year. So it was a Thursday afternoon. It was about 2 p.m. and I was exhausted. Out of nowhere, I was ridiculously tired. And I didn't have anything that I had to do that afternoon. So I took myself off to bed. I was that tired and I fell straight asleep. I woke up on the Friday morning and I could not walk. Just couldn't walk. And so my friend took me off I was living in Byron Bay at the time. She took me off to the hospital there. They didn't really know what to do with me. They did a few tests, blood tests, and then they said, go see a GP in a few days' time. Anyway, what I'd actually contracted, and it took a few weeks to diagnose this, was something called Ross River virus, which if there's any Aussies listening, they might know it, but a lot of Aussies haven't heard of it either. It's a mosquito-borne disease, and it affects all of your joints and all of your muscles. So every joint, every muscle on my body was agony, like even tiny joints on my fingers, like this. And the reason I couldn't walk was because my knees were fused. The joint didn't bend, so my knees were completely straight.
My word.
Yeah. So very painful, very uncomfortable. And the interesting thing about Ross River is that if you contract it, not everybody gets symptoms, but people who do get symptoms, the first bout comes for about 6 months. Now, a few days earlier, I was having a conversation with a friend, and I actually said out loud, I feel crippled, because that's how I was feeling. Actually, as wonderful as life was in Australia, it clearly was not where I was meant to be for my next phase. And I was feeling crippled by it. And I literally said the words out loud, and my body went, we can do crippled.
Let me show you what that looks like.
Precisely. And so this is why, if you're ever, the power of your words is amazing, because your subconscious, your body is always listening, and it's incredible at doing what it's told. So if you tell it that you feel weak, you tell it that you're tired, that you, etc., it will follow through. And it really did. My body was very clear that it wanted me out of Australia. This was the experience I was having, which, I followed up with something else later on. But it did crippled. And I literally lived that experience. And then we fast forward round. I did spend a lot of time out of Australia last year, and I came back to kind of pack things up. And then it was literally Feb this year, and I was sitting in a tea ceremony. I don't know if have you ever done one of these tea ceremonies?
I haven't.
No,
I haven't.
And so there's a beautiful place in Byron. I know they do these all over the world, and you kind of go in at sunrise. This particular one was sunrise, and you're served 5, 6 cups of tea. It's very contemplative. It's in silence. It's sort of meditative,
Mhm.
and you just sit there and you just contemplate. And I was sat there drinking my tea. First 30 minutes or so, nothing, just peace, just pure peace. And then out of nowhere, I felt this surge of energy flush up from my base, my root of my body, flush all the way up. And I felt two emotions. I felt grief and gratitude for Australia. And then I just had this immediate message: your time here is complete and it's time to go.
Mm.
And as soon as I got out of Oz, all the physical stuff disappeared. So, it's sometimes the guidance is there, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
always look how you think it's going to look.
And the world today doesn't allow us an opportunity to listen to ourselves.
Yeah,
Everything moves so
agree.
quickly, and especially with the internet and social media, and everything is at our fingertips. The the importance of the tea ceremony for you really allowed yourself to listen to what was inside that needed to come forth.
Absolutely. And sometimes the thing with the intuition piece as well is that it doesn't always make sense. So like I came out of that ceremony. I was with a friend, and she's very intuitive as well. And she's like, something happened. I know something happened. She was like, what happened? And I was like, it's time to leave Oz. But if you look at it logically, why would I leave Australia? I'd gone through the whole visa process. I was a citizen. I had a beautiful home in a beautiful country that is safe and incredible, standard of living, surrounded by incredible friends. I have the most incredible friends. Like, when you're like, there's nothing here that's bad. Logically, stay put. But then
That's what
knowing,
everybody wants. Your
yeah,
package was full. If somebody else looking from the outside saying, what are you complaining about?
exactly. And my parents are like, huh? What are you doing now? Um, but yeah, so the intuition is often not, it doesn't line up often with logic, but you just know in yourself that I need to follow this course of action.
So then you move out of Australia.
Yes.
What changed for you?
Well, I feel like everything has sped up once I've got into other environments. Business opportunities, the direction my business is taking. There's some very interesting products and services that I'm developing at the moment, which I won't share quite yet, but they are a wonderful evolution. I'm really excited to bring those to life. And I don't know if they would have emerged if I'd been in Australia. Who knows? Because I feel like I'm on this different timeline. But the people you meet, the experiences you have, and they're all
Mhm.
things that push that growth into the next phase of where you're going.
One of the things that you had mentioned to me before we got started, and it feels like this is where you and your business really are, is that energetically sustainable level of success. And that I think the energetic piece to those three words is the most important. But is that really where you're feeling that you have landed or you have created for yourself?
It is, and I'm continuing to, and it's a key component that when I work with people, we also look at. So when I talk about energetically sustainable success, it's about actually having a lifestyle, a career, a business that is structured for your energy.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's key is that not everybody's energy, the energy that they have available to them, the flavor of that energy is the same. And if you're listening, you kind of know this even if you've never thought about it, because we've all got those friends that are like Duracell buddies. They can just keep going. They have this endless energy. You go away on a trip with them and they're trying to fill every hour of the day. I'm clearly not one of those people. And then you've got other people like me who are like, let's have a bit of downtime. My energy ebbs and it flows. And so we're not all the same energy wise. And yet we've been dropped into this 9 to 5. And of course, I use the word 9 to 5 loosely because I think most people who work in corporate do not work 9 to 5, but a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday world
Mhm.
that doesn't
I
honor.
can't fit that at all. I do everything I can not to fit it. on purpose because it doesn't fit me.
And that is amazing recognition for yourself, because
Hmm.
a lot of people are trying to shoehorn themselves into this, sometimes because they have to, but also because they feel that that's what their success should look like. And
Hmm.
so, this elevated
Mm.
identity, for you to actually sustain it, it's got to be energetically aligned. Otherwise, you'll do it for a bit and then you'll conk out. And so,
Hmm.
the way that we've traditionally designed our lives is predominantly around time and productivity. We plan our time, we plan our calendars, we're looking to be productive. Whereas actually, it's a perception shift, but it's about being optimal with your energy when it ebbs, when it flows.
Hmm.
So there's another system called human design. You may be familiar with it. You're
I've heard, I'm
listening.
not super familiar, but I've heard the terms.
So it is basically, it's a blueprint of your energetic potential. So it
Hmm.
shows you kind of how you move energy in and around your system. And there's different types of energy. There's 4 different types of motors, for example. And so depending on your combination of those energy, and so for example, the emotional energy, which 51% of the population has, that comes in ebbs and flows. So when you're on it's a wave actually. So when you're on the top of the wave, when you're really happy, you'll feel like Wonder Woman. Take on the
Hmm.
world, you say yes to anything, you're just on fire. It's a bit like when you're ovulating. When you're ovulating, you're like, you could do anything. And then when you're on the bottom of the wave, the energy disappears. And it can
Hmm.
be good for some deep creative work, but you can't power through in those moments. And there's different types of energy in your design. So actually, if you design your career, if you design your lifestyle, your products, your services to complement the energy that you actually have, then that's much
It
more
can sustain
sustainable.
through those ebbs and flows, and it does those, the ebbs don't mean a lack of business or a lack of productivity or a lack of, it's just part of the natural process of getting to where you're at or being where you are.
Yeah, the reality is we're all different. We're much more individual than I think sometimes we give ourselves credit for. There's a lot of unity, but whatever study you look at around, whether it's a fasting study or it's eat this, eat that, this exercise, there's never 100% of people that it works for.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we're all a little bit different. And if you've ever been that person who, looks at someone else and goes, well, they run their life that way and they're able to do it. And then you try to emulate that in your business model or the way that you parent or whatever it
Hmm.
might be, and yet you can't do it. It doesn't mean that you're a
Hmm.
failure. It just means you've picked up someone else's model and it's probably not the
That's
right one for you.
interesting. Mm.
Because when you structure it correctly for you, you're able to do it successfully and feel great in the process of doing that. So yes, I would absolutely say I've done this with myself as well, because I went from obviously a consulting career where I worked long hours, you know 5 days a week, and now
Hmm.
I ebb and flow much more with my energy and I utilize
That's
that.
Hmm. Wow, that's really fascinating because for me as a financial advisor, there's a mold that what that person is perceived to be, and I don't conform well to most anything. So anybody that knows me wouldn't be surprised by that statement. And I really struggled with the fitting into the perception of what that is supposed to be, whether it's a work schedule or whatever. And I was going through a business coaching process, and um, shout out to Gage. And through that process, I realized that it's okay. I wanted my business to have ebb and flows because I wanted I wanted myself and my husband to have logistical ebbs and flows where we are, and that ebb and flow. And once I gave into that and gave it permission to happen, and I can tell you this is what my year looks like, and this is where I am throughout the year, and it really works. And when I'm in a spot that I want to be more busy, it happens. And when
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a spot that I don't want to be as busy because of what we're doing, it happens. And that's okay. And once I gave it permission and allowed the space for it to become, it's turned into this beautiful schedule of here's where we are, here's what we're doing. And my, the whole picture is working much better than when I was trying to force what I
Mm,
wanted or I felt like I wanted to do into what I thought was expected.
I love that. I really do.
Mm.
And
And I
people,
didn't realize really what that was until you're explaining. I'm like, oh, wow. I can understand. I can totally understand how that makes such a difference.
and you have to be prepared to let go of a lot of the conditioning and the programming
Hmm.
around what
Hmm.
success looks like. I
Hmm.
mean, this is a really big part of it is your success metrics or your definition of success again is going to shift as your identity shifts. And so, if you were holding on to a success metric, which was every month was the same income and that you had to
Hmm.
work and acquire a certain amount of clients every month, et cetera, you'd never feel successful operating your business the way you do. But the
Oh
fact
no.
you have that recognition that this is a much more correct way for you to run your business means you get to feel successful, you get to enjoy it, and all the
Mhm.
all the other things that
You
flourish.
get to enjoy the high points of that wave, and then you actually get to enjoy those low points because they're it's okay that they're happening.
Yeah, it's the contrast. There's
Yeah.
always got to be
Yeah.
contrast.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's really interesting when you talk to business owners and also a lot with women is that they
Hmm.
feel they need to structure the way they service their clients in a certain way, and
Mm.
that they can't speak up often and do it a different way. But most of your clients pick you because they resonate with you.
Hmm.
They trust
Hmm.
you, they like you, they want to work with you. And so if you turn around and you say, actually, this is the way that we're going to work together, it's, I've tested and tried this over the many years. I've never had a client turn around and be like, no, they've always gone, sure, sounds great. How do you want to
Mm.
do it? And so it's like we don't often give ourselves as much permission to do the stuff the way that we want to do it because we're
Mhm.
so used to feeling that we have to defer to what someone else's needs are. But in the end of the day, when we structure something in a way that allows us to be energetically sustainable, we do better. We serve our clients better. They have a better experience. The whole shebang.
You've given us some great tips for identifying the liminal space and that are tangible. And so when somebody's listening to this, they're thinking, gee, I wonder if it's the right time for me to work with Michelle. What does that, what are some of the triggers that say, yes, this is the time and this is when you should reach out? Or maybe you've identified some of the five, maybe you haven't taken it that far, but what should somebody intuitively listen to themselves and say, I think that I would like some assistance moving to the next level.
If you're in that liminal, if you've identified some of those aspects and you know that you're ready for your next thing.
Hmm.
So there's this sense that you're in between. That is when it's time to get in contact with me. And if you're sitting there thinking, yep, this all kind of sounds a bit familiar, I'd like some more info. I have an identity evolution quiz that you can take,
Hmm.
and it's going to tell you how you're currently navigating that liminal space. It's going to give you one of three archetypes. So if you go to the URL, the identity quiz, make sure the is on it. So theidentityquiz.com. And you can complete that. It's totally free of charge. You'll get your archetype. I'll send you some useful information so that you can understand what is actually happening and what needs to
Hmm.
change for you to move into that elevated identity. And then you'll come into my world. And then if you want to have a conversation with me, we absolutely can. So yeah, if you just know you're ready for the next thing, that's the indicator.
Wonderful. Oh, this has been super interesting. Thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge and your experience, your personal experience as well, because it really is part of the story of how you're helping people make the changes that make sense for them.
My absolute pleasure. It's been lovely chatting to you.
Thank you so much for listening today. Today's show was sponsored by Seaside Solutions, my financial services company. As a business owner, it's easy to be pulled in many different directions, and often taking care of yourself plummets to the bottom of the list. For me, I find myself outside to reground. My time outdoors helps me manage my day more effectively and be more present for my clients. Through this, Discover Rising Tides was born. At Seaside Solutions, we truly believe that education is the foundation of financial wellness. Our primary focus is to provide guidance that is designed to help you achieve your long-term financial goals and visions. Working with a plan allows space for doing more things that you love, like being outside to make the inside better. If I can help you create or realign your plan, or if you would like to be added to my weekly newsletter, please let me know. This week's topic was 5 ways to set more achievable goals. Your referral means the big, beautiful world to me. And if I can help, please let me know. And thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.